most part, we're not going to care, right? Because I mean, there's two basic things that you have in a control system, really. I mean, you have meters and you have gauges. We don't care who sees the meters. What we really care about is who can turn the dials on the gauges, right? Because if an attacker can bring pressure up, or if they can open a valve, well, then they can do really, really bad things. The number one thing that we do in operational technology is protect the process, not the information, right? And so when you're concerned about industrial control systems, it's all about controlling that process, right? And so there were some really good points that Carlos had made about segregation, right? And I would even take that a little step farther. There are special devices that you can get that are literally one-way devices. Because how do you attack a system? How do you get into the system? Well, you get into that zone on the network, right? And so if you only allow data to come out for monitoring, then you're in a much better position, right? So if you don't allow data to go in, well, an attacker can't get in. And then a lot of the things that are really difficult to control, like, controlling access, like machines have to be available 24/7 by 365. Do you think they got a screensaver timeout? No, right? And so physical controls become an inherited control, right? You have to control things through other means, but it takes the tough things like updates and patches and things like that, which are still important. They're a secondary control, right? But it sort of moves them so you don't have to do them as frequently, right? In a control system, you don't want to necessarily be updating software all the time because it can break. When we went from Windows XP Service Pack 1 to Service Pack 2, DCOM went away. Well, remember OPC is based on DCOM. So a lot of things in control networks broke, right? And so it's really important when you're doing updates, they have to be tested, they have to be validated by the manufacturer. And so you can't do those on a regular basis. You have to do them on more of a periodic basis, right? And so having primary controls that separate those networks is really one of the key controls. ICS systems, loss of life, loss of revenue, we sort of talked about all that stuff. So another question I have, who do we have in manufacturing? Who works in the manufacturing area? Okay, a couple hands. Yeah. Do we have anybody in power, energy? Yeah. Anybody in pharmaceuticals? Okay. Brewing? I know Carlos is brewing. So again, our jobs, know your network. How do you do that? Right? There's a lot of great free tools out there to help you know your network. We'll talk about those later. Know what hosts are on your network. Know your enemy. Know what your enemy knows. Right? Protection is key, but detection is must. You have to have a way. There's a saying, you always want to be left of boom. How do you know when boom happens? How do you know when you move to the right of boom? Right? You have to have a detective control in place that will help you figure that stuff out. Right? And then applying defense in depth, we talked about that. So you're not alone. We have Quad City Cybersecurity Alliance, USCERT. Has anybody here heard of USCERT or ICSCERT? Okay, so USCERT was created, I think, in 2000. They modeled themselves after CERT.org, which is Carnegie Mellon, which came about after the Morris word was released. And ICSCERT is really focused on industrial control systems. So it's a whole branch underneath USCERT that is wholly dedicated to industrial control systems. They are a global organization. We just had the Industrial Control System Joint Working Group last week. People from all over the world came together, people that are concerned about controlling these systems and keeping them safe, get together to exchange ideas. It's a great forum. But there are a lot of places, again, if you want a copy of these links, let me know and I'll give them to you. Lots of places that you can network. Infogrames is a great organization. American Society for Industrial Security, Home Security Information Network, professional LinkedIn groups, things like that. I think sharing information is really the best way to make sure that we understand how the industry is changing and new tactics, tools, and techniques that we can use to secure networks. NIST Cybersecurity Framework, that's a great way that we can use to sort of think about industrial control systems. You know, again, IT is very different from OT, and when they built the National Cybersecurity Framework, they had industrial control systems in mind. There's a lot of other IT frameworks, but they really don't focus on industrial control systems. And so this is one of the things I do like about the Cybersecurity Framework. They break everything down into identify, protect, detect, respond, recover. Identify is important because you got to, again, know what's on your network. Protect is the most important. You have to protect what's on your network. Defend or detect, respond, recover, they're lesser important. Like, because if it's, you can't restore harm from backups, right? Human life and equipment, you can't restore from a tape. And so we have to think about things in process controls very differently than people have to think about them in the IT world, where they can just recover a system from a backup system. So, this is a slide. Oh, yeah, so the Cybersecurity Framework from NIST is a way to standardize the way that we express where we are, what is our state, what's our current state, what's our future state, what do we want our state to be. They call that a profile. They also have this thing called tiers within the Cybersecurity Framework, which is sort of a maturity model. So you can go ahead and start with a very simple maturity model and say, okay, these are the basic controls that we want to adopt to protect a system. And then as time goes on, you just implement more and more of these things. It's a good way to sort of frame information security. And I would say if you are an IT practitioner, and it sounds like we have more IT practitioners than we do operations practitioners, this applies to every environment, right? So if you're not familiar with the NIST National Cybersecurity Framework, I would download it and sort of read up on it. There's a lot of good stuff in there. This is just the first area, which is the identify area. So what can you identify? Asset management. Know what's on your network. Know what equipment, what brands, what models, what firmware. Identify and categorize your risks. Secure your network interconnections. The only way that you can do that is to understand where your operational boundaries are, right? So the industrial control CERT, the ICSCERT, they actually go on site hundreds of times a year to companies that are compromised. And they'll do really deep studies about what happened. And like 99% of them, there's some sort of a trust boundary that's been broken. So knowing what zones you have and selecting very carefully what goes into different zones is incredibly important. Training, there's a lot of really good training that's available from ICSCERT. So they have, a list of 10 courses, give or take. And I've been through all these in the last year. They're pretty quick, they're online. But if you want to know more about how to think about these systems, what kinds of attacks are happening in these systems, then this is a great way just to get some free training. It won't cost you a penny. TEACS is another one that I found, and they offer things on network assurance, forensic basics. If you do have some sort of a compromise on a network, ransomware is a great example, right? Everybody's heard of ransomware. It's been rampant this last year. Well, it turns out that not most, but a lot of ransomware installations are really following a breach. So when somebody compromises a server and they're extracting data on the server, what they'll do is they'll install ransomware. Well, what do? You restore it from tape. You literally blow away all your forensic information, right? And so you're burning down all the evidence of what was really a crime. So learning how to do response without losing the evidence in what was really a crime is kind of an important thing to understand as well. FEMA's got great response training. There's more and more of the emergency response standards that we're using today in industrial control system security. So, It's free, you can go register online, get a free account, and they'll provide the training. So there's a great white paper out there, the recommended practice for improving industrial control system cybersecurity with defense in depth strategies. And Carlos touched on defense in depth. It's really important as well. So I would definitely recommend that. And then NIST has a standard SP 800-82, which is very specific to securing industrial control systems. And what they've done is they've taken the NIST 853 standards, which are sort of an overlay standard that apply to every environment, and they have provided an additional layer of controls specifically for control systems. So it gets you to think about things in a control system environment that you might not have considered. And so I always recommend that to people as a resource as well. So if you don't go somewhere, you're going to go nowhere. Or if you don't start somewhere, you're going to go nowhere. If you don't have some type of a security plan or program within your company, and again, this isn't limited to operational security. This goes for IT security too. There's a lot of small places that really don't have a program around security. And so if you're interested in it, you know, just like Carlos says, go to management and take them, you know, start to build a plan. Start to build an elevator pitch. You know, just simple things that you can say over and over to get people thinking about security, right? And to start that conversation, right? So that's sort of what I did was, you know, I started to build into presentations just statistics from the news. And, you know, before you know it, management sort of started to take notice and asked a lot of questions. Another reason that specifically within our company, why we got interested in cybersecurity was there was an event in the German steel mill where they lost control of their furnace, right? So somebody got control of the gauge, right? Started to turn the knobs, and then they disabled the ability to turn the knob back. And so what happened was their furnace just melted down. They just had hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of capital investment that they lost. Right? So I'll show you this video with you. I thought it was really interesting.
While we are talking about cyber scandals, Germany has acknowledged an iron factory in the country was targeted by a cyber attack causing massive damage. It wasn't revealed which particular plant was targeted or what the damage entailed, but this does seem to underline the potential real-world dangers from cyber attacks. Digital rights activist Benjamin Sontag thinks that such threats can only be stopped if governments are more open.
This iron plant in Germany is quite an issue. We don't expect a nuclear power plant or an iron power plant or an iron plant or any missile things to be connected to the internet. To be computerized is the thing, but to be connected to the internet and to be hackable that way, it's quite unexpected. The people who do this kind of attack are usually either paid by a state or a mafia or a big company, so they have to do it anyway. So if you make it public, the more they will know that there are failures and issues and bugs in software, the more they will be willing to spend more money on fixing them.
So when the president of our division found out about this, he lost his freaking mind. And he was like, could this happen to us? I'm like, yeah, of course it could happen to us, right? So, you know, everything that you do in cybersecurity is about, you know, sort of understanding what your vulnerabilities are, understanding what threats there are, what the impact of those threats are, right? So that you can sort of do your risk analysis. And then determining, are you going to mitigate that risk? Are you going to transfer that risk? Maybe get insurance, right? Are you going to accept the risk, right? So you have to sort of take this risk-based approach to security in operational technology, just like you do in IT. So one of the lessons learned that I had over the last year, because I've been working a program really hardcore for the last year, is you have to know who your stakeholders are, right? And you have to know specifically what role they play in the company through the lens of cybersecurity, right? So, for example, you have a legal team. Well, your legal team is the company or the division within your company that can create agreements, like get legal clauses into vendor contracts or into procurement contracts, right? They come up with the things that are legally binding, right? Your safety team, just like Carlos indicated, it's really critical that you get integrated with your your safety team and build an all hazards response plan, right? So like those guys have concerns that are way, you know, a lot of different concerns. Cyber is one of them, and they have many concerns, right? So you have to make sure that you're framing this thing, working with them as a partner, so that, you know, you get the right level of activity focused in the right area. There's a great old saying, you got to know your toothbrushes from your diamonds, right? Because if you try to protect everything the same way, then you're going to lose less toothbrushes and more diamonds, right? And so working with the safety team is critical. Working with the ICS engineers is critical. You know, you want to make sure that you give them the proper level of education. You know, in industrial control systems, there is like this HMI that a lot of people on the shop floor are using just to view screens, look at gauges. You can't really change any set points or make any changes. But the engineering guys, well, they're creating all those screens, and they can actually turn the dials and grant access to different views, right? Well, if they're sharing their passwords to somebody else in the shop, does it matter if the protocol can be spoofed? Well, not if you have somebody who's like not happy with the company, right? You have to be worried about the insider threat too. So, you know, the simple things like ensuring that people don't share passwords, that they have strong passwords, that they're using a domain controller that's behind the firewall in the zone that they're in. These things are important. So, knowing your stakeholders is important for all those reasons, but also, if you're going to build a program, you can't do it as one guy. You have to have a lot of different people in the organization that you're going to partner with, and they're going to have to do part of that work. You can't set a 300-question assessment in front of anybody and expect that they're going to get that done in any amount of time. It's like, it won't happen in a year, right? But if you can take 10 questions and get it in front of 5 people, that's something that you can actually get done. So knowing your stakeholders is important, and many hands will make light work. Again, if you can split up that work and distribute that work among many different people, then these things tend to actually get action and move forward. Work top down. So in our program, what we did was we met with the president of the division, and we got his buy-in. And then we asked him to provide us access to all of his direct reports. And then we invited them into a meeting. And we said, we'd like to launch this program. These are the components of the program. Are you on board? Yes, they were all on board. Great. Now, these are all the people that you report to. And we met with all those people. And now you had to go across different locations, right? And we just sort of worked from the very top of the organization to the bottom. And then when you get to the bottom and the guys are raising concerns about, well, hey, why are we doing this? Well, it's because our president said we have to do it, right? And this sort of takes a lot of the heat off. It does help to lubricate the system and make sure that things are working. So this is the Cyber Resilience Review. If you go to USCERT or ICSCERT, .uscert.gov. There's an assessments button on that page, and one of the things that you can download is this thing called the Cyber Resilience Review. And this was the first step at an assessment that they built. And this isn't specifically designed for industrial control system areas, but it sort of applies to everybody. It's a PDF form. You open the form. It's got a lot of questions. You fill out the answers to the questions. And then it's got a little analytics that are built into the PDF. And you must be using their JavaScript engine or something. And it gives you an idea of the areas where you're doing really well and the areas where you suck, right? And again, you got to know your toothbrushes from your diamonds, right? So it sort of helps you to prioritize where you can put effort into some sort of a remediation plan. And this is sort of the first attempt. I would recommend anybody that is trying to bootstrap a program, start here and just do this yourself. And that will give you a really good idea of where you can start. But this is really the best tool that I have found for doing assessments. It's called the ICS Cybersecurity Framework.
Cybercrime. Nations developing cyber weapons and corporate intellectual property theft are escalating each year. In 2013 alone, 552 million identities were stolen from computer systems, a 493% increase over 2012. Over the past 12 months, 100% of internet-connected systems have been scanned by attackers with malicious intent. You will be attacked. It is a matter of when and how. Hackers gain access to your system by finding the easy vulnerabilities to exploit in your network, whether it is firewalls, passwords, or even a simple virus in an employee's email. Once inside, it can take months before you even know that a security breach has happened. How do you know what your vulnerabilities are? How do you know that the easy vulnerabilities are corrected? The best solution is to know your system, and before you proceed to determine the vulnerabilities, rank your priorities, and make the necessary changes, use the Cybersecurity Evaluation Tool, or CSET. Developed by the United States Department of Homeland Security Industrial Control Systems Cyber Emergency Response Team, CSET's objective is to help you maximize your limited cybersecurity resources. Based in industry-accepted standards, CSET covers a broad range of depth and cybersecurity topics, providing you with assurance that you understand your cybersecurity posture. Conducting a CSET self-assessment will help you quickly collate everything you know about your cybersecurity defense. Learn what you don't know, introduce you to cybersecurity topics you need to know, identify your vulnerabilities that are easily attacked and easily fixed, and give you a threat-based priority list to help you make the best decisions on improving your network defenses. CSET is free. It costs nothing to download and get started. Here's how it works. Select a standard and a level of rigor appropriate to your organization, and CSET will automatically filter out the non-relevant material. You only review what is pertinent to your organization. Next, build a network diagram that is representative of your system. Then, answer a set of industry standards-based questions. Each question is written in a straightforward and easy-to-understand manner, and is accompanied by supplemental information to help you better understand the meaning and context of the question. Finally, CSET will give you a detailed analysis of your cybersecurity baseline by providing a systematic and disciplined approach to evaluate your network security baseline, identifying gaps in security and ranking the gaps according to threat information obtained by the ICSCERT program, trending future assessments to see changes in your cybersecurity over time, and helping demonstrate return on investment of your cybersecurity efforts, and reporting the results of your assessment in professional reports you can use to communicate your efforts to management, employees, or cybersecurity professionals. This analysis pinpoints the areas to work on first, allowing you to plan and prioritize mitigation strategies in the most efficient and cost-effective way possible, while helping you defend against cyber attacks before they are started. Don't let potential weak points in your system allow hackers critical access. Take the steps today to increase your cybersecurity. To find out more, Google DHS CSET or ask your ICSCERT representative.
So if you are interested in performing assessments within an industrial control system, I would really strongly recommend that you go to the ICSCERT website, click assessments, download CSET. CSET is phenomenal. It is bar none the best assessment tool that I have found for doing assessments. Now, is it perfect? Far from it, brother. I mean, it's just not the perfect tool, but it's a good tool, right? So what we had to do was to take those, so we went through, and first you got to select what assessment standards. Now, there's people that work in energy, so maybe you got the NERC standards that you have to apply. If you're in pharmaceuticals, you got a different set of standards that you have to apply. There are many standards that are, specific to various subject areas, but there's also like key questions, right, or universal questions that you can select. For us, we just selected key questions, and we started with what we call a low security assurance level. One of the ideas in the assessment is to set an assurance level. Like, how important is it that you get it right every time, right? In some organizations, it really doesn't matter, right? I mean, it's low risk. But if you have people that could be hospitalized if something goes wrong, or they could die if something goes wrong, or there could be a major environmental leak if something goes wrong, well then it's, that requires a higher level of assurance. Well, this year we just started with a low assurance, and we have the smallest set of questions. We get through them, and then next year we're going to go to the moderate assurance, and the year after that we'll go to high assurance, because after having them work through the wizard-based interface within CSAT, all the stakeholders, everybody agreed, the subject matter experts, not me, but the subject matter experts in the company said, yeah, we need to have high assurance in our organization. And if you can get people to make that decision for themselves, it takes all the heat off of you as somebody who is trying to promote a project or some sort of program, right? So, really, really great tool. This is sort of their analytic engine, just sort of an idea of some of the reports that you're going to get out of the system. You can sort of click on one of these bar graphs, it'll drill down and get into more detailed information. Again, this is just sort of a view of the assurance level wizards that they just sort of walk through and ask you questions. Now, the questions that you're going to be asked, again, a lot of these are what I would call secondary controls, but they're important controls nonetheless, right? The primary controls that you're going to have are really the separation in your networks and the way that you architect your network, right? Because if you do those things and you're not allowing data to come into your network, then you're not so concerned about, you know, a vulnerability in some software revision or whatever that doesn't get patched right away. But still, you got to have it. I mean, if you know there's a vulnerability, it's important that you address them eventually. So then another option that you have through ICSCERT is they'll come out and they'll do a design architecture review with you. So once you sort of gain information about what's on your network, you can share that information with DHS, and they can provide you information and best practices about how to architect your network, right? What are the zones that you really need to need? What are the controls that you need to put between all these different zones, right? So they can actually help take your basic network drawings and show you where you could make improvements within your network architecture. Another tool that they have is, this is sort of a picture of the standard zone. They have all this information is up on the ICSCERT website. They have this thing called the Network Architecture Verification and Validation. And the way that works, similar assessment, you go through, use a packet capturing tool like Wireshark to just capture packets flowing through a choke point on your network. And then, I mean, if you do that by yourself, you can go in and you can sort of just look at the high-level statistics. You can see what MAC addresses are on my network, what IP addresses are on my network, what protocols are on my network, do I have Modbus on my network, stuff like that. But what they'll do is they'll actually run this through the Security Onion distribution. They've got some bro scripts that they've set up that will specifically start to pull out like firmware revision levels on different devices, and you know, what models do you have, what known vulnerabilities are in your network. Do you have black energy running on your network? You want to make sure that you have a clean network to start from. And once you have that solid baseline, then you can start to build on top of that. Then they have this really cool thing. It's the infrastructure visualization platform. There's not a lot, you have to be a pretty big facility in order for them to come out and do this. They do this like for a lot of stadiums and stuff. They'll actually bring a 3D scanner out to your organization. They scan the areas, and they put that on top of the architectural drawings that you have for your buildings and stuff. So you can, and they'll leave several copies of this with you that you can share with your civil response people, and it allows them to see what the interior of your organization looks like. So if you had an active shooter, you know, incident or something like that, you don't really want to like have somebody from your company escort police in, like it's just not a possibility. So this gives them an idea of what they're walking into if you have a very large industrial area. So this is a great option as well. Open source tools. Anybody here at Yara? Yeah, just a couple of you in the back. So there are signatures that you can get for all these bad things, and you can just use Yara to scan network traffic and hosts to look for these bad things. It's a very great tool. Monsol's got the dump it utility for doing memory captures. So again, if you have a server that's compromised, you know, and you have like ransomware on it, well, very likely the key that you need to decrypt that data is in memory. right? So one of the best things you can do is do a memory capture, right? Get a forensic image of the hard drives, so you can share that with people that might have access to tools that could potentially get your data back. Grass Marlin is a great tool. That you can. It's sort of like Wireshark, where it's passive, right? It just sort of listens on your network, but it'll actually do the diagramming for you, and then you can take that Grass Marlin file and actually import that into CSAT, and boom, it does all your drawings for you, which is kind of nice. Wireshark we talked about. If you've never used, anybody use Wireshark? Oh, a lot of people, good. So I won't cover that too much. Google lurking, you know, it's amazing like what you can buy on eBay. I mean, you can go out and buy Allen Bradley, you know, PLCs and stuff like that. Shodan, of course, anybody use Shodan? A lot of people use Shodan, so that's what they call it, but they're basically scanning the internet all the time, and they'll expose, like you can go there and search for ICS on shodan.io, and they'll show you like all sorts of stuff that's just like directly connected to the internet, and half that stuff you could then go to Google and type in, you know, the brand and model, and then type :PDF, password, and then boom, you get the document that like shows you the default passwords, you know, it's ICSCERT admin, right? So things like that. Windows built-in tools, nothing better. Yes, sir.
Are there any like virtual labs that you can set up?
There are. Okay. Make sure you get your name on the list, and I'll provide you a list. There's a guy that I just met this last week that has taken and virtualized an entire system inside of a Raspberry Pi. So all the industrial control protocols, all the networking, all the routers, all the switches, and he has a little connector that goes on the GPIO to a breakout board that's got a full traffic system, right? And it's just wild, right? So you can emulate all this stuff and learn how to use the protocols, do protocol sniffing and all that kind of stuff, all off of that one little $30 computer, right? Awesome.
That's cool.
Yes,
so you brought up the Yara stuff. Yara's getting a lot of exposure nowadays, you know, like even SANS just took up SEC 504, and they talk a lot about it. I mean, more and more organizations are starting to integrate that stuff into their to hunt stuff like that.
So another thing that I'll say is I'm going to try and get a list of fact sheets about all the products that I talked about on the CornCon.net website. And I have a one-sheet page that's just like a brief article about what Yara is that came out of like an ICS, you know, JWG newsletter, right? Just this nice one-pager, yeah? So anyway, these are the Windows built-in tools. I love using Windows built-in tools because A, you can always get to them, right? You never have to worry about like how do you get something into a machine because it's already there. Also, if you use Windows built-in tools, you're not increasing your attack surface, right? So every time you put a tool on a machine, it's like one more thing that you can be used against you. So by using the Windows built-in tools, you're not expanding your attack surface. So these are like standard things that I do. The task list -services give you a list of all the services that are running, right? Which is really important because if you go and you do a netstat NOA, you're going to get a list of the traffic, like what are the open communications that you have on what port, and then it's going to tell you the process ID that it's connected with. So you can go back to the task list.services list and associate this protocol with this application, and now you know those two are connected, right? And then the other things that are on this list I tend to use in all of our basic investigations or forensic investigations, just to get sort of an overall sense of the state of a machine, right? So those are all really, really good ones. Just a list of whatever questions. I did pretty good on it.
No questions at all? So before, I'm gonna just attacking this one, like you said, right? You touched on a topic on an issue that is very good in this, and all this stuff that with the actual involvement of CERT and the guys from the government. That's a great thing to do. I mean, at least when some companies that use hazardous materials, like if you use chlorine or stuff like that, they can go in there and do assessment for you, and they've got a ton of resources. Now, I know that it might be something that it's touchy-feely if once you involve the government in the operations, a lot of people start raising hands. But they got a lot of resources to help you out on handling that stuff, especially if those materials are linked to a SCADA system. So those guys know a hell of a lot about that, and they got brought into resources. So that's one of the first things that I would definitely tell you, look into it. Just give it a try.
And another thing too, it's really important to bring up, if you do decide that you want to reach out to CERT and work with CERT, there's, or anybody in DHS, there are very specific protections that they extend to you, right? That will ensure that your information is never shared with a regulator, that is not, it's not available for a Freedom of Information Act request, right? So there are very specific things that they do to protect your information. And you can tag anything that you share with them. You can tag with the TLP protocol, sort of, white, this can be shared, amber, only share with the organization, red, don't share with anybody. So they're really good about that. Getting back to sort of this whole process thing, the intent is to protect the process. We don't really think about all the different ways when we're architecting a system that a system can be misused or abused. I heard a really good one this last week where a lot of trains use infrared signaling to control tracks, right? So there's this kid, he's a smart kid. He takes this programmable remote control, right? Stands over by the switching equipment, programs it. He captures the information to switch the tracks. So now he has the ability, there's remote control, click, click, and he can actually send trains on the wrong tracks. And he was actually had the unfortunate experience of being one of the very first people that were prosecuted under the newer, stronger laws on protecting control systems. But you don't think about these things, There's another control that's used in train systems that won't allow a train to pass a red light, right? It's a very simple control that's built into their control systems. Well, guess what? You reverse 2 wires, and now that red light becomes a green light, and you just circumvented that control, right? So all things are insecure. All control systems are information systems, and all information can be an attack. A 1 or a 0, just that value can be an attack, right? So you have to sort of think about these things in new ways that you wouldn't have considered before. All right, well, thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate it.